Welcome to Facebook Live, except it's not live. We are recording this because the two of us work in the evening. I'm Vicky Benton. I'm a mental health professional that goes to Community Bible Church, and I'm here with my friend, Ann Hayes, who is also a licensed professional counselor. And we thought it would be kind of interesting to do more of an interview format, so I'm going to be basically interviewing Ann, but I'll probably jump in there and say a few things myself. But I particularly wanted her to talk about couples because that's what she really has a heart for, and we thought it would be really great to talk about what's happening in marriages with all the stress of this pandemic. And so I wanted to start out, though, by having Ann share a little bit about what in the very beginning got her interested in wanting to devote her career to strengthening marriages and helping couples do better. So tell us a little bit about that part.
I will. First, it's really fun to do this with Vicky because we've had past women's ministry experiences where we've been able to co-host things, and so
and we just frequently gab when we get together.
Yeah,
it's pretty natural.
So it's fun to do this with her. And so how I got into couples is it was really out of just feeling a lot of failure with couples, and so I went to grad school, got a counseling degree, and I came out and I felt fairly well equipped with individuals. I got boned up on trauma and could help with anxiety and depression with individuals. But I noticed that when a couple would come in, it would more than double the emotions in the room. And so I would find myself checking my watch, like I wonder how much longer till this session's over, and wasn't comfortable at all and didn't feel like I was helping at all, and that was excruciating. And so for a couple years I was just like, I'm just not going to do this. I'm just not going to do couples. It'll be better. It won't be stressful. But I began to get referrals because I'd see an individual and they'd say, hey, can you see my husband and I? And I'd be like, well, not so much. So I looked around. I thought, well, do I go back, to grad school and take couples courses? What do I do? And I looked around at the models of couples therapy that had good research outcomes on how well they helped couples, and John Gottman on the West Coast was one of them that had some great material, and then Sue Johnson, who's in Canada, who came up with the emotionally focused couples therapy, had 70% positive outcomes for couples, which most couples therapists, if you look at the research outcomes, it's like 25%. Don't tell anybody I said that because
That's our secret.
Yeah, shh. So I got that training. I started in 2012. It was very rigorous, and I knew it was for me when I sat in a room with other couples therapists in New Orleans, and we were being trained, and there was so much biblical resonance. Like the things that they had come up with were, like how God had designed it. They weren't given that kind of language to it, but we all know where it came from. And there was a lot of Christian counselors in the room, and I just thought, this is what I want to be doing. Like, if we have strong Christian couples in our communities, we're not going to be having to discuss all the gender issues. It's like, I want to be like that, And so I just felt like if we could be evangelistic by showing off emotionally bonded, close connected relationships in ways that none of us have been taught to do. Because I felt like she had discovered some things about what connection looks like and what distress looks like, and you can practically help couples get closer. So
good point. There's such a spillover from how a marriage is doing to children and a culture, but yeah, it goes everywhere, the neighborhood, the workplace. So thanks for telling us a little bit about your background, and we are both working during this time, so tell us a little bit about what you're seeing with couples now during all this. What are you picking up on? What's happening?
I think it's kind of all over the map. I think some couples who were doing poorly are doing better. Some couples have chosen not to continue via video, plus they feel like they've got enough going on and they don't really have the energy to devote to continue with counseling. Some couples who are doing well are not doing as well. And so you kind of have it all over the map. I've also found that I've been able to do some fairly effective marriage counseling with some younger couples who have they can meet several times a week because they're not working. and so to have a more flexible schedule, they can meet more often, and there's more change that we're seeing. I hadn't anticipated that, but that was a nice outcome to note. Not outcome, but difference to notice.
So let's take those different categories, because I'm sure that people would be interested in hearing what in the world is happening that some of these marriages are getting strengthened. That just seems counterintuitive to me.
Yeah. I think that's the idea of the things that we're arguing about and the cycles that we get into with each other. Suddenly, those things aren't mattering like they used to. So the thing that used to really set me off, and that look he gave me that caused me to really kind of come unhinged, like I'm really refocused in this new way, and he's the one that I'm doing this life in this house with. And so we're going to overlook the things that were really triggering us, and we're really in lockstep together in a way.
So the laundry can be on the floor, but it's not leading to demise of the marriage.
World War III, right. So just, it's kind of putting things in a perspective with this pandemic, with the different fears and the different new things, because none of us have been through anything like this.
So some of what's strengthening is the things that we might consider little things in a bad time. They're big when times are good. So what are they doing instead? So they're not being picky about the little things. They're kind of letting things roll off their back. But are you seeing things that they're doing, or maybe the ways they're talking to each other? I mean, what's the kind of the takeaway for ideas as people are listening to us that they can use this time to make their marriage stronger? Some of the foundational ideas in emotionally focused couples therapy is that couples come into a therapy session in stage 1 where they're escalated, they're distressed. And one of the reasons they're distressed is because you get different cycles. So usually of a couple, one of the spouses is frustrated and irritated and angry, and their energy's kind of going up the scale, and they're coming toward the other spouse and like, this isn't working, we got to talk about this, and the way that other spouse is going to take that in is as a complaint, because whenever you're you always, you never, or there's some kind of you, and then the complaint is lodged, then that other spouse is going to defend it, and depending on, or he or she's got like 3 options. They can get angry and come back. They can get real distressed and kind of shut down, which is just as distressing as a going up, and then they'll pull away. And when they pull away, that signals to the spouse who's kind of up here with the distress, you don't care. You're not seeing me, and I'm invisible, and it doesn't matter what I'm feeling. And so then you kind of get into an infinity cycle, because what's not happening is there's not understanding. There's not a sense of, wow, I'm just so upset today because I was trying to teach this to my child and I felt disrespected. I need to tell you about that. And so often, if the husband's kind of more the withdrawer, the husband could then begin to try to fix the problem for the wife. Like, well, what if you did this? What if you did that? That's a real classic kind of issue. So in a coupleship, you can get someone who's pursuing, and then it can often land in the other one to where they're withdrawing, and they might pursue back and get angry back. And so there's not this connection because we're fighting to be understood at that moment. So when someone's trying to fix me and is not understanding me, then that's just more frustrating and irritating. So a couple who has flip-flopped and now they're doing better, they've learned how to tap into the more primary emotional space, which is I'm really kind of sad, I'm discouraged, I feel embarrassed. They're able to tap into more primary emotion and share that with their spouse in a way that the spouse gets it and then wants to kind of be involved in that interaction. That's interesting. So what you're seeing for these couples that are doing better, they're actually more emotionally vulnerable.
Mm-hmm, right.
Instead of having kind of more of an attack, withdraw,
mm-hmm.
distance, pursue, whatever, mm-hmm. you're seeing that some of these couples are actually being more real,
mm-hmm.
talking about matters of the heart,
mm-hmm.
the raw emotions. That
mm-hmm.
is very bonding.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think suffering can do that for us. We just sort of, I don't know, we
right.
just don't have the energy to keep up.
Right.
Maybe a facade.
Right.
We're just more honest
right.
about our hearts.
Right. And I think even this morning, like I had been preparing for this 516, and I'd been fairly focused on it, and kind of a raw spot in our marriage with Clayton and I is during grad school, I got so focused and so into what I was studying that he often felt ignored and alone. And our cycle can often be withdraw, or someone will complain, and then we kind of both go away in our distress. And so this morning I was realizing that anytime I was trying to prepare, if he'd walk in the room, I would kind of act like I wasn't preparing, so he wouldn't think that I was paying too much attention.
Yeah, you're trying to help the church with
to
this,
my
but
preparation,
also
right?
trying to help your marriage.
Right, and so I'm kind of aware, I don't want him to, think that this is too involved. I still want to be present with him. But he was picking up on that vibe that I wasn't as engaged, and so he kind of mentioned it to me. Are you okay? You seem kind of preoccupied. I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of doing this. But so this morning when I woke up, I was like, I'm worried. I'm worried that I'm putting too much time in on this, and I'm worried that you're going to get frustrated with me. And I even told him I'm acting like I'm not so busy when you walk in the room, and just my ability to tell him that. And because we've been to EFT counseling ourselves, that's the acronym EFT, because when I learned the model, one of the disadvantages to being married to a therapist is they want to try the model out. And so I'm always saying, let's go get this counseling. And I said that to him 4 years ago, and he said, can we just get a book? And so I was like, sure, we can get a book.
So what you ended up doing with Clayton that was so beautiful is it really wasn't about the content, it was about this process. So you let him in on the process inside of me as I'm worried about this,
Right.
getting prepared for this.
Right.
What do I want to share with the church that will be helpful, but at the same time, I want to help my husband. I don't want to be neglectful there.
Right.
And so how did he handle that?
It helped him
vulnerable.
it helped him understand, and he was like, oh, okay. He's like, well, no, I hadn't been particularly bothered that you're preoccupied. I've noticed it, so we're able to kind of talk about it. I think in the past I would have been afraid, like, he's going to get mad at me, or I've gotten it wrong and I feel bad. And so because of going through this training and the counseling with a local counselor, we now can talk about things that we really didn't
So one
have
of the
words
takeaways
to.
from all that really might be to the extent that sometimes people have not really had a lot of practice talking that way. It's
Right.
just not their normal way of
Right.
talking. You think
Right.
about when schedules are busy, that
Right.
you've got stuff going on, and talk can be about schedules, or where are we going to get supper tonight, or whatever. And so for couples that could move into a little bit of more of that vulnerable sharing could be a really beautiful, helpful thing, so that they could identify things like, what is making me sad?
Right.
What do I have
right.
anxiety about? Because if you don't know that about your own soul, of
Right.
course you can't share it.
Right, and so that's an issue of muscle memory. That's a great point you're bringing up, because the reason we have an old cycle is we've practiced it over and over again. And so you can go to a workshop, like a Creative for Connection workshop, where they break this down into step by step. When you go to an EFT counselor, what they do is they lean in and they understand each spouse, and they kind of slice off a piece of that more primary emotional space, and they have it shared. And that's it. And couples always say, well, you just heard me say it. And I'm like, well, could you turn to your spouse and share that? So when they're sharing, they're looking at their spouse's eyes, they're sharing this new space in this new way, and their brain's kind of laying down some new pathways to take that in. And then I always process it like, what was it like? Because often a spouse will say, I'm not sure how he took that, because spouses have this way, they're reading each other's body language, everything. So I'll say, I don't know, you guys know each other, and the kind of the proof's in the pudding, because it's like, no, he didn't really mean that. He said that, but he said that because you told him to say that. And so it's almost like the litmus test is in that sense of sincerity that we can read in each other. So I think muscle memory, but you think about anything you've learned, you've had to do it repeatedly. So I'll have to say,
Yeah, I've also heard that called procedural memory.
Okay.
That whatever your procedure is and the way you do life, you practice it over and over again, and voila, you have a neuronal pathway for that particular behavior, and it just is so natural. You don't have to think about it at all. So one takeaway could be if couples could find a way to give themselves an assignment to maybe once a day, once a week, whatever they feel like is manageable, to share a heart word. Share something that really is deeper than just chit chat.
I would say like a book like Created for Connection by Kenny Sandifer and Sue Johnson. It gives practical things to do. The hard thing about something like sharing a heart word is this great truth about each of us, all of us, is that we often don't have the words to put around our deepest, most subjective experiences. Because in order to have the words to say about that, it meant that at some point in our life, and the best way is from infanthood on, is we needed a parent to be able to notice our affect, and that part of their brain that reads that could say, oh, if I was 5 and you kind of look sad today, kind of what happened? And of course, a 5-year-old doesn't know, and so it's the idea of I need another nervous system tracking with me, tuning in
sometimes given language that you
what's
can't.
going on. And so, like if Clayton's doing that with me, or if I'm doing that with Clayton, and he's telling me, man, I just feel so bad about this, then I can say, well, tell me more. Are you feeling like this and this? Because that's kind of how I might feel. And it's kind of, I'm kind of entering his experience. That's the
You're
empathy piece.
You're giving the language for it maybe when he cannot.
Right. We're
and
kind
vice
of
versa.
back and forth with it. And then when I've done that with him, as I'm talking about it, because I tend to internalize a lot of what's going on inside of me, then I'm using my words. And it's a back and forth. It's a syncing up, an attunement to each other. And it's the idea those two come together. And that, if I'm telling him bad news about feeling sad about our relationship, even though it's bad news, the fact that it's in a softer way, he can take it, and it connects. That's what's bonding. That's what connects a couple emotionally, is when they're sharing from that level, and it's received and taken.
And when you have that kind of bond, you can really weather all kinds of circumstantial difficulties.
Right.
So if that foundation is there, you're kind of a little bit good to go.
Right.
I noticed that Ann brought some books with her, and I thought, well, one of the things that can happen during this time is you can actually get some pretty cheap counseling through books, and you can do it while you're socially distancing, which I just realized we're not doing. But
That's right. That's right.
I hope Ann doesn't have cooties. But I thought that we could end a little bit with Ann telling us about these books and maybe just a little bit about what she likes about them, because some of you may enjoy developing some of these areas while you're hanging out at home.
Yeah, so this is the book I'm currently reading. It's by a pastor on the West Coast named Mark Allen Sletsky. He's actually the pastor of Byron Keeler, who's taught us, he's come to town and taught us counselors in town how to do trauma therapy. And so this pastor had a crash in his own ministry, and he realized he had not learned how to really live out of his heart, understand his emotions. And so it is a really good book that gives practical tips on the message of each emotion. He's got a website that's excellent. The first part of the book is more how we got to this point in church history to where emotions are viewed as bad, stay away from them. And he's saying, hey, here's how you pay attention to your emotions. And then this was kind of, Mark Allen Sletsky references this book. This is Peter Cesaro, who is in a shorter form is detailing kind of his story of how he had a crash and burn in his ministry, and he realized he had not paid attention to his past, the family he was raised in, and how that contributed to him being emotionally cut off. And so that's kind of the forerunner book. And then this is a psychiatrist in Virginia, and he's really taken neurology and brain scans, and he's tying it in relationally to our relationship with the Lord and to our relationships with each other. So my disclaimer with every book is you need to read it with discernment. And some of the things said might not be totally to your theological liking, but you want to take what's practical, what's usable, and then put that part in your relationships.
Yeah, and I can vouch for that. I think these are three really, really good books, and I think that the church today seems to be getting deeper in its understanding of our soul and what goes on in our heart. And I think for a long time it's been more of an emphasis on behavior, and that we just kind of try to do the right things, and yet some stuff was going on that was never getting processed. So I think we're getting better at that. And what's happening is not only are we growing in a greater Christ likeness, but the bonds that get created from one to another is so much stronger when we can talk at that level.
That's right. That's right.
So I hope that this has been a helpful thing that you have felt invested in with this time with Ann, LPC, and me, Dr. Burks, with my scarf. So we're looking forward to seeing you soon out in the foyer.
Thanks, CBC. Bye.
I was going to